It seems like every year I'm spending more and more time pulling weeds and dragging the hose around my fruit trees. And it's got me wondering, there has to be an easier way. Well, there is a simple thing that you can do that could make all the difference for backyard fruit trees. And it's not watering, it's not fertilizing. It's a fruit tree guild. And in this video, I'm gonna make one. The problem with traditional fruit tree care is that it means constant input on the part of the gardener. So all of the watering, fertilizing, pest and disease prevention, the weed suppressing, mulching, everything you have to keep coming back to again and again to try to keep the tree healthy and productive. And the other part of it is that fruit trees, it's not natural to see a fruit tree in its, natural growing environment with bare soil or with just like a monoculture of grass around it. Fruit trees and every other plant evolved to grow in an ecosystem, to be sort of symbiotic with other plants and organisms around that give it benefits, that protect it, that do all of that type of work. So the idea of a fruit tree guild, it's a permaculture design principle where you take a fruit tree and you put certain companion plants all around it that give different benefits to the tree. And so you're basically creating a mini forest, a food forest. You may have heard that term before, but a little mini forest where all of the plants work together to just have a healthier growing environment. And the result is less work for the gardener and a happier and more productive tree. A fruit tree guild uses companion plants that all work together and serve some sort of function that helps out the fruit tree. So there are 4 main categories you want to try to include when you're planning out a tree guild. There are a lot of ways to do this, but these are the 4 things to watch out for. So first of all, we have suppressors, or these are the plants that you could think of as a living mulch. So these are things that are suppressing weeds, and keeping other things from encroaching on the root space of the fruit tree and getting in the way and competing for nutrients and water. The second category are dynamic accumulators. And these plants have a bit of a superpower because they send out a really deep taproot. And they pull in minerals from the soil and it becomes a part of the plant tissue. So as these plants grow, you do what's called chop and drop. You cut them back and just spread out the plant matter all around like a mulch, and it gets incorporated into the soil, and it's basically a living fertilizer. The next group of plants are the ones having to do with bugs. So these are the ones that either repel bad bugs or attract pollinators and beneficial insects, or both often. And these are going to be flowering herbaceous plants. Particularly flowering herbs I find are great, especially strong smelling herbs like rosemary and sage and thyme. And last, we have to talk about the really important role of nitrogen fixers. These are plants that have another kind of superpower where instead of depleting nitrogen from the soil as they grow, they have the ability to actually pull nitrogen from the air. And then after the plant grows and dies, that nitrogen can then be incorporated back into the soil to be available to other plants. So definitely something you want to include in your tree guild. All of the plants in a tree guild are typically edible, and they all tend to serve multiple functions. So everything is working together in this relationship that has benefits for all of the other plants and especially for the soil, which is key. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Let's talk the plants, the ones that I picked for my peach tree guild. And let me tell you how I planned this out. Now, everywhere is going to be a little bit different. Kind of depends on what your climate needs. So for me, I'm looking for things that are low maintenance, drought and heat tolerant, but also things that stay sort of neat and relatively contained. You could put all kinds of things in a fruit tree guild or a food forest, but some things are going to sprawl. They're going to spread, they're going to reseed themselves and kind of take over. I'm doing this in my backyard, so I need it to stay a little bit more polite, maybe is a good word, and I need plants to more or less stay put where I put them. So let me walk you through what I've chosen. First off, let's start with the superhero of companion plants, and that is comfrey. Comfrey is one of those dynamic accumulators, so it has a really deep taproot. So here we go. This is a crown of a comfrey plant, you can see how deep this taproot goes, and it's just going to really get in the soil and provide a lot of good benefits for the soil. And this is one of those chop and drop plants. So once it gets big and leafy, you can cut it down and just leave it as mulch around the tree, and that will break down and add all sorts of good stuff to the soil. So these I don't want to plant too close to the tree because they are relatively heavy feeders. So I don't want them in any sort of competition, but they're still going to provide a lot of really good benefits. One more note about comfrey. They can spread pretty aggressively. They can reseed freely. So if that is a concern for you, as it is for me, the variety you want to look for is Bocking 14 because it's a sterile variety, which means the seeds that it produces aren't viable and they're not going to germinate and it's not going to reseed everywhere. It stays in just a nice little mound. So Bocking 14 is the one to get. There are many, many other great plants you can choose from that fit into this accumulator category. So I will, in the description, I will put a list and I will put some links for you so you can take a look at what some of the other options are. Okay, next we have another great companion for just about anything, chives. I already have these all over my vegetable garden, all over my kitchen garden. I plant them between my strawberries to help repel pests. I just keep adding them everywhere because, for one thing, I like how they look. They're a pretty grassy mound, and you know, you've seen the blossoms where they have a nice straight stalk and this little purple puff ball on the end. They're so pretty. And I also love to cook with them. I feel like I can put them in everything, so I don't mind having a ton of these. But I specifically want to put them around my fruit trees because they're so great for so many reasons. So this falls into the, well, several categories, really. For one thing, it can be a bit of a weed and grass suppressor. It can kind of serve as a living mulch depending on how much you plant and how many you mass. It's the same thing with other bulbs like crocuses or daffodils, right? They also, because of the strong smell, they can repel certain pests, and that's why they're such great companion plants for other edible plants. And then when they bloom, they attract pollinators. So it's really a win-win-win. So I'm going to dot these all around my peach trees. Next, this is a sage plant. This is actually a really cool one. It's a tricolor sage. So it has these purple stems and then the variegated green and white leaves. It's really cool looking. Smells amazing. So that brings me to plants like this. A lot of herbs and just general herbaceous plants are really great for a lot of things. For one thing, again, anytime you have a strong smell, it's going to help repel unwanted pests. It will also bloom and attract beneficial insects. So herbs like sage, thyme, rosemary, all of those culinary herbs are really great options. I'll probably be adding some others too, but for right now, I just have these 3 sage plants that I'm going to add in the area. And we have one more category to hit, and that is the nitrogen fixers. So what I've chosen, and again, this is largely because of my climate. I live in a hot southern climate, so these plants love sun. They love my sandy, little bit loamy, but mostly sandy soil, and that is peanuts. So I've got a whole bunch of peanuts that I'm going to plant and get growing. And I'm going to put these all around my peach trees, but also in other spots around my garden. For one thing, I sort of want to see where they grow well. But I want to plant a lot of these because why not grow a lot of peanuts, for one thing, but also because they have that great benefit of adding nitrogen to the soil. And that's going to help just about everything in my garden. So I'm really excited about this one. There's other things I'll probably add a little bit later on, things like nasturtiums, because they're very easy to grow from seed and they just look so pretty blooming, but they're great trap plants for different pests, and it's another edible plant. Marigolds, I actually have some marigolds planted, and they were definitely nibbled on by my friendly backyard rabbit visitor that I've got, but they're still growing, and so marigolds, again, are such a good companion plant for everything, so I have them all throughout my garden. I chose these plants because I need them to do double, triple duty in this fruit tree guild. I want to get the most benefit from a relatively small amount of space. And I do like the way that they all look, but it's not just about looking pretty. I need them to work hard too. So now let's just get them in the ground. I've just about finished planting everything, and I wanted to come down here and show you a couple things, particularly a couple mistakes to avoid. So if you've noticed, everything is still pretty spread out in this area, and it's always the temptation to crowd things close together, but I'm trying to keep an eye out for how these plants are going to grow over time and making sure nothing is too crowded. It's sort of like roommates, you know, they each need to have their own little spot, but they're sharing a common space, so they need to have plenty of room to themselves. You also don't want to plant the plants too close to the trunk of the tree. I've kept everything basically around the water line of the tree, not too far from that point, because for one thing, that's where they're not going to compete with the roots of the tree as much. But you also just in general want to keep good airflow around the tree. And even though a tree guild is really beneficial, we don't want to cause problems by crowding in on the fruit tree itself. Last, but definitely not least, a big part of this is also mulch. Now, I'm trying to fill up this space with plants to kind of serve as a bit of a living mulch, but that's going to take time. But mulching is definitely a really important part of this process to protect the soil, to keep moisture from evaporating too quickly, insulating the roots. And in some cases, if you're like me, my soil is naturally very sandy. So I always add a really great composted pine bark mulch every year, because over time that breaks down and gets incorporated into the soil and just adds to the soil benefits, which is the whole point of what we're trying to do. We're trying to feed the soil and make it the healthiest growing environment possible for my fruit trees. A fruit garden that cares for itself starts with just these small, simple steps. And while it may just look like a few tiny plants right now, before long it's going to be a humming, buzzing, perfect little mini food forest in my own backyard. Have you tried this? Have you ever planted a fruit tree guild? I would love to hear in the comments, what is your experience with growing a fruit tree guild, and what are some of your favorite fruit tree companion plants? Hopefully, if all goes well over time, this is going to really minimize the effort that I have to put into maintaining these peach trees. But honestly, at this point, any improvement is going to be a big deal to me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.